Hello, welcome to Autistic Chess Openings. We're covering the Scotch Gambit as white, line number 10. All right, let's review today's line. Let's put Scotch Gambit on the board. And now they go h6. We covered this once before, and then we spent a bunch of time on the main lines. Now we're coming back to this because it does come up at lower levels of play, and we need to be able to shut it down. So they go h6, and we take in the middle just like before. And this time, instead of trading knights and pulling out our queen, they put pressure on our knight with bishop c5. This fails instantly, and we're going to shut it down hard. Bishop takes f7 check. We're going to sacrifice our light squared bishop for their dark squared bishop. So this is a very common tactic in the Scotch Gambit. They take, we check. They block, we get the other bishop back. So at this point they usually trade knights, and now we're attacking the rook in the corner, so they go queen f6 to block that, thinking that if they can trade down queens, then the damage will not be too great. We're not going to allow that. e5 is a good move here, but we're not going to play that, and that is the most common move by white here. But we have a subtlety, a little finesse that I have prepared. We're going to go queen d3, taking a step back. It looks passive, but it's very strong. So we go queen d3. So remember that when they challenge your queen, take one step backward. Now, if you see, our pawn is loose, even though there's nothing backing it up, and that makes them nervous, and they want to get their bishop out. And so the next development move they usually do is d6 to restrain our pawn and release their bishop. At this point, we develop our knight to the really nice square knight c3, which in this case, when they don't have their knight out, has a really nice landing square at d5. That makes them very uncomfortable, so they bring out their knight next, not their bishop, to prevent knight d5 by covering with their knight. And now we go bishop e3, threatening to skewer their queen, pin their queen, and skewer the rook in the back. And they don't like that. And so they bring their rook out to e8, usually preparing to get their king into the corner and try and get comfortable. We're not going to allow that. So we go knight to p5, targeting c7, which is strong, but it's even stronger than it looks. Their position is starting to really crumble at this point. The engine is giving us a massive score. They take at b2, which helps us even more. That's their most common move, 4 games out of 4 took there. Yep, 4 out of 4. And then we castle. And their position is hopeless at this point. Material, it's not, it's actually equal. But the engine says we're 550 points ahead at this point, which is more than a rook. So, and we'll go through a little bit of the ending point in the, when we get into the details, which we're going to do right now. All right, let's get into the details. As usual, I got the throat clearing problem. I apologize for that. It's been a lifelong fun thing to have, and I will try and minimize it. I got some water here, and I'll try and move away from the mic when I have to clear my throat. Okay, let's get into this. Scotch Gambit, h6. All right, we take in the middle. So we have 2 common moves here. Knight takes d4 is the lion's share. They do that half the time, more than half the time, 52%. Bishop c5 is the next most common at 13%. So the rest of it is evenly divided amongst a number of other moves. And what's really nice is that the first 2 moves are awful. The most common moves are awful. And so you're going to really be able to punish h6. And this is why I chose the knight takes d4 line. It leads to a much higher error rate. Now let's go ahead and pull it up on my cheat sheet on the side here. For those of you who are new, this is my custom programmer that I wrote that shows that I've pre-mapped all these positions. And these scores here are Stockfish 18 scores, which is the best chess player in the world. It's a computer program. And these are I call them points, but it's centipawns, hundredths of a pawn. So 0.55 is 55 100ths of a pawn, or a little more than half a pawn. And it recalculates at every step. This goes to a depth of 200 million nodes, a node being like a position off this position. So then I recalculate, and then they do that move, and then I recalculate, and I just keep recalculating all the scores. And this is my way of combating people with a lot better resources than me. I just keep re-examining. A depth of 200 million is pretty good. I prefer a billion, but I don't have good enough computers for that. My computers are very old. So, and I have a small fleet of them running this. So anyway, here's the scores, and they go h6. And so we can see right off the bat, h6 is not a good move. It gives white a 57-point lead instead of equality. If they did knight f6 or bishop b4 check or even bishop c5, they'd be much better off. They do h6. That gives us a lead of 57. And if you look at our possibilities, we have castling and we have knight takes d4. I've explored castling and I've explored knight takes d4. And I've looked at the moves and then the following moves and then the following moves and then the following moves to determine that knight takes d4 is much more error prone by our opponent, and they're both equal. So we've already looked at engine strength. They're equal. And when things are equal, we want to get into the other criteria that matters, trickiness. So knight takes d4 is way more tricky. There's a lot more, and we can see that by seeing the likelihood of the moves over here on the left. This is the website leadchess.org, where it's free to explore, which is why I use it. And so I like exploring. So I can see how common our opponents do certain moves. And I can find out what is intuitive for my opponent based on real-world feedback. And so bishop to c5 is the second most common, and let's look how bad that is. Bishop c5, we can see right here, bishop c5 gives us a lead of 241 points. The most common move, knight takes d4, gives us a lead of 140, and we covered that before in an earlier line. And so the top two most common moves when you take with the knight on d4 is a blunder and a massive blunder. And then finally, the third most common, knight f6, 9% of the time, now they finally have their top engine move, and their likelihood of playing it is only 9%. And then after that, knight e5 is their second most strong engine move, and that one is 8%. So knight f6 and knight e5 is what they need to be playing here, and they only play it 9% and 8% of the time. Knight takes d4 and bishop to c5 is what they're playing, and so we're going to prepare for that first so we can shut down these players who play h6 and then play sloppy moves and think they can get away with it. There's nothing more frustrating to losing to somebody who just flails and charges and wins, and it's annoying. So bishop c5 is an awful move, and we can see why if you look at the engine right here. So they play bishop c5. Take a look at this. Bishop takes f7 check, plus 239 points. Our second best move, knight takes c6, plus 61 points. Bishop takes f7 is the reason why bishop c5 is so bad. So we're going to pop off their pawn on f7 check. And now the most common move is for them to take back with the king, so we're going to cover that. And as we can see over here, that is the also, it's better than king to f8, but king e7 is actually better. King e7 is played 1% of the time. King e7 is their top engine move here. Don't take back, sidestep. And yet, taking back and king to f8 are the most commonly played, and they're bad and worse. So find that very interesting. So they take back with their king 84% of the time, so we're going to cover that. Queen h5 check is what we're going to be playing, and let's look at the engine here. Plus 249. If we do that, obviously we trade it off, so we need to do this to take back. So we're going to go queen h5, check, and now g6 happens 59% of the time. 36% of the time, they merely step back here, and we're going to have to address that another time. King f8 is actually a better move, but g6 is way more common, 59% versus 36. Okay, not way more common, but still more common, g6. All right. So they go g6, and we could actually check in the middle, queen d5, but it's weaker. We're not going to try it this time. We're going to just go straight to the bishop and take it back. So we take that bishop back, and we're done with that exchange. So we're now at a new junction point. I call them junction points, where my opponent has a number of moves that they might do, and when we're done with that tactical sequence that tends to go the same way every single time that we do them, every time that we do it. So here we are. He might play d6, he might develop his knight, he might, he might trade knights, he might go d6, he might go queen f6, he might go knight f6, even knight at g to e7. He has a number of moves he might do here, and we're going to start with the most broad coverage we can get, the quickest, which is the top move. 40% of the time, they trade knights here. So we're going to study that one. So they trade knights. But how's our score coming along? We're at 300 points ahead. That's a whole piece. Sorry. So we're a whole piece ahead at this point in position. We have not cashed it in. We need to cash it in. So we need to do this correctly. But this is another junction point where black messes up even more. They give us another 29 points here by trading knights instead of going knight f6. That's the knight f6 would have been their top engine move. So they take and we take. Obviously, we have to take back. And now queen f6 is finally their top engine move and the most popular move. So they go queen f6. Now at this point, white's most popular response is to push e5 and stuff that pawn in the way of their queen. And It's not going to suppress d6 that much. Okay, maybe it does a little bit, but here's the thing. We're going to spend a little time on this move. Why did I choose queen d3? We have a ton of options. This is a junction point for us. If black were actually learning their openings, which they're obviously not, they would want to study at this point, all the things that we could do, and they'd probably get ready for e5. But we have a lot of options, and we want to go through them all. And so I went down all these very, very carefully. And queen e5 does have some nice gains here. So if we did do e5, let's make a note of where we're at. We're at about 330 points ahead, so 330. So we play our top engine move, they play their top engine move, and these three are marked because they are common. So here's the three common responses. And queen e6, if we did do e5, queen e6 is 70% of the time. So let's say they did queen e6. So we're at 330. 328, 333, and then the engine reevaluates and says, actually you're 354 and I was mistaken, you weren't 330. So Stockfish is getting it wrong by 20 points. Why such a big swing? Because we got two queens in the middle of the board and I'm only going to a depth of 200 million. 200 million usually is good enough to give me accuracy that doesn't swing 20 points unless we're in a position that's wide open, very tactical, and two queens are in the middle of the board, and each white has a gazillion moves available to them, and so does black, and it branches enormously. Then it's going to have a 20-point swing, and sometimes even bigger. So I had to be more thorough. I had to look down everything because of that. So anyway, so if we do push that pawn, they're going to go queen e6 probably, and when they go queen e6, yeah, we gain another 20 points just playing the natural knight c3. And then knight c3, they go knight e7 most of the time, and yeah, we're slowly getting a little bit better of a position, and we're at 362. So our 330 goes up to 362 most of the time. So 330, 362, another 30-point gain. That's pretty good. What about the rest? What about queen d2? So I went and looked at queen d2 and looked at the branches off there. Queen a4, queen e3. And this one doesn't have any data because no one's playing queen d2. So I couldn't look any deeper. This one, if we do queen d1, here's all their common responses in black over here. And so I went down every single one of these and looked at black's common responses if the moves are played, because we're down to, let's see, we're down to 2.6 thousand games left. And queen d3 is amazing. You go queen d3. Why is it amazing? All right, queen d3. The reason is because right off the bat, you're going to gain 40 points if they don't go queen a6. They need to go queen a6. Now, how many people are going to do that? It automatically, we can trade queens, doubles up their pawns, and that's unattractive for a lot of people because of what they've been taught their whole life about doubled pawns, especially breaking it up like this. These two in the middle end up, not having any support on the side and whatnot. And maybe they're too focused on my attacks and stuff. And plus, if they go there, my queen can go to any number of places, and they got to calculate that. But how many games answered my queen d3 move with queen a6? Ready? Let's see. Queen d3, queen a6. None. 0. So out of 193 games, not a single person played queen a6. That's how invisible queen a6 is. So we can pretty much count on them not playing it, and if they do play it, we're still very well ahead. They go queen a6, we play c4, and we end up with a position where we have a lead of 360, which is still better than the 330 we started with. So we're still growing 20 points, even if they find queen a6. But if they don't, it gets nasty. So the most common move when we step back is d6. And because it's not queen a6, they immediately drop 40 points, which is better than the line where we do e5. But it gets even better. So d6 is 2/3 of the time. So first of all, it only branches to 2 moves we have to learn at this point. 64% coverage, 32% coverage. Together, 96% coverage of this position. If we step back, queen d3, we have 96% coverage of this position by learning only 2 moves. d6, which will happen 2/3 of the time, and 97, which will happen 1/3 of the time. If instead we go e5, we've got 3 moves that we got to learn, and after they go queen e6 and we go knight c3, they've got 3 there, and their points aren't growing so great. Look at how much queen d3 grows. We go queen d3. 2/3 of the time they're going to go d6, so let's cover that. We go knight c3. And I looked down those moves as well to determine knight c3 is the one that is really nice. Because we have lots of options here, and because we have lots of options here, I was able to explore a whole bunch of stuff on both of those, and amongst them there was one one line that was devastating, and it's this one. Stepping back with the queen and going knight c3. So, and having them do d6. And it has the bonus of they only have d6 and knight e6 that they're playing, so it even branches less as an extra bonus. So, they go d6, we go knight c3, and now take a look at this. Ready? d6, knight c3. Knight e7 is the most common move. We now have a branching where we have 3 lines to learn that all have a substantial likelihood. Knight e7 is the most common. We're going to gain another 20 points there. Then we go bishop e3, threatening to skewer their queen to their rook. And now look at this. All right, so we go bishop e3. Their reaction to it, they need to go rook to h7. Who's going to find that? Or queen h4, move the same piece twice. Rook to d8. Is anyone playing any of those? No, they're playing rook. They're playing the ones I marked here in black. Look at how likely they are to play things that are a lot worse, and look at how much stronger our score is getting. If you go down the e5 line, you end up growing another 30 points. If you instead go down the line we're going down, you don't gain another 30, you gain like another 130 or something. Let's see here, 330. We end up in the 400 to 500s. It's much, much nicer if they just play natural, intuitive moves. This line is. So, bishop e3, threatening bishop d4, which they then have to answer, and they answer it by moving their rook usually. But they also, and that's 29% of the time, they also go bishop e6. Oh, and then we can just skewer it. So bishop e6, awful, and then a6, c5. a6 is just devastatingly awful. They play a6, we respond bishop d4 and skewer it. Let's see what else they're playing. c5. They go c5, we castle queenside or go queen d2. Actually, we have a whole ton of options I'll need to map. Anyway, so we threaten, we go bishop e3 threatening, they move their rook in response so that we can't skewer it. And now knight b5 is devastating. Anytime you have a knight going to c3 or f3, well, c3 actually. Anytime as white you have your knight going to c3, it's often threatening to go to d5 or b5 and hit c7. And so it's easy to lose sight of that as he's so focused on struggling with his king side over there and preventing knight d5 by getting their knight out to e7. So we hit knight b5 at this point, and take a look at queen takes b2 and how much more of a lead it gives us. And yet, that is our most common move. After we go knight b5, queen takes b2, happened 4 times out of 4, with the average rating being 1777. So these are lower rated players who play the h6 variation of the Scotch Gambit. And usually when they play that, it's a clear sign that they have not mapped their openings as early as turn 4. So they take in the corner and we castle. All right. Now, another option, instead of castling, we could have traded off queens by going queen b3 check, and I did look at that. So let's back up a little bit. All right. So they brought out their knight. We brought out our bishop threatening to skewer. They went rook to e8, and we went knight to b5. And then when they take in the corner, we could go queen b3 check. And I mapped that one pretty far and looked at how likely it is to come out of this. There's their 3 common moves and their scores in an endgame. And I thought maybe an endgame's better, and maybe we could take a look at the C pawn instead of the B pawn. And we end up, you know, in the 400s. But this is so much more devastating to leave the queens on the board, and when we're tucked away safely in our corner, we castle, and their king is in the middle of the board, and we've got control of the middle of the board. It's so much more devastating, and our scores are much higher. So we're going to stick with this one, because look at how bad the final 4 moves are. If we castle instead of going queen b3 check and trading off queens, take a look at the only 4 moves that we have data for, which is not a very good data set. We would like to have a larger sample space than that. But knight c6, rook d8, rook b8, rook g8, look how bad they all are. They need to go queen f6 here. Back off, get over there. They shouldn't have even taken in the first place down in this corner. That was a bad move. Look at all the moves that are better above it. So what are our threats here? And what are some of our responses? First of all, obviously we're attacking c7, but it's more than that. We knock out c7, d6 is unprotected, and our queen can take it. If they move 1 rook to prevent this, so if they push, we get the fork. if they move a rook, we can still pop it off, and then they have to move the other rook. And if they do that and spend that much time doing that, it's even worse than anything else they can do. So we'll see here. We'll look at an example of that. If they go rook d8 to stop it, and then we take knight takes c7, rook to b8. Look how much higher our score is now. And the reason is because this bishop d4 move. We can seize that diagonal anytime we want. So we've got knight takes c7. We've got bishop d4. Those are our top two threats here. They could go knight c6 to stop bishop to d4, which is actually their top engine move. Well, no, it's not. It's better. It's their top. It's the strongest common move. Sorry, I misspoke. So it's actually better, but we still pop off that pawn on c7, and now d6 is sitting there unprotected. And we also have either one of our rooks could go to b1 and target b7. So if he moves his bishop off of that, if he tries to develop his bishop, we can strike at their queen. Their queen cannot go to a3. It cannot go backward and diagonally to a3, and it can't go straight back at that point, and it has to then go down this diagonal, and we can pop off our rook. We can put our rook on b7 and get onto the 7th rank and start skewering their queen that way. We've got our bishop attacking h6. I mean, there's threats all over the board, and it's like which one do we want to do? There's so many. So the one to do is knight takes c7 or bishop to d4 in any of these positions. So rook d8, it's liking both. Knight takes c7 and bishop d4, and I have to dig deeper to figure out which one. I haven't decided yet. And we don't have any data, so I didn't map past this point because I don't know what's likely. Even at this point, we don't know whether these are very likely. We have 4 different moves, but only 4 games total. But at this point, we have to guess. But let's look at the ones that did get played. So they go rook d8. We can take the pawn or go bishop d4. They go rook b8. We could do either one again, but the knight move attacks that rook, and they're likely to move it. And if they move it, they lose another 140 points. So this score right here of 600 is really 740 if they don't let their rook fall. So I like the knight taking. Bishop d4 is pretty good too. They got to back off to b4, and then we got a bunch of rook moves we could do, but I prefer taking. So most of the time I'm going to take at c7. Let's see here. If they move their knight, we take at c7. They bring their queen back. We've got a number of good moves there. Knight takes a8. Yeah, pop the rook off. The engine likes letting the rook fall. Because again, there are so many attacks here. And you'll have to play chess at this point. Because without knowing what they're likely to do, I can't map it. Without mapping it, I can't nail it down precisely, every single one of these moves. Rook g8, bishop d4 is good. Knight takes c7 is good. So yeah, at this point you have to play chess, but the thing is if you've memorized this line and they go down this line with you, you're going to be on move 14 with a devastating position with your entire starting time on your clock, and you can now take all the time you want to very carefully answer each one of their moves at this point. You have to play chess now, and you have a devastating crushing position that you can dismantle them very carefully, thinking at each step, because you have all this time, because you did this all so quick. And that's the objective of the opening. We're mapping these so that we can come out of the opening with a devastating position. And so, mission accomplished. Anyway, that's the line for today. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, thank you.